Welcome back, welcome back. Well, amid a backdrop of turmoil and uncertainty on world financial markets, the UN next week is convening for its General Assembly in New York. But can very much be achieved when there is so much fear about global finances? And is the UN, 60 years old, capable of facing 21st century problems? To answer that and many other questions, I'm delighted to be joined by the UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-Moon. Mr. Secretary General, starting with this week's headlines, the credit crunch, the financial crisis, how does that affect your work and the work of the UN? Or does it not?
As one of the global citizens and Secretary General of the United Nations, I am deeply concerned about this current financial crisis happening in the United States and which may have impact on other developed countries. As we are moving collectively to realize the Millennium Development Goals by 2015 and many other global challenges, I sincerely hope that this will not affect negatively. I hope that the world leaders, particularly financial leaders, will try to resolve this issue as soon as possible.
Do you feel that the people who compare this crisis with 1929 are exaggerating? Are you that worried?
I'm not in a position to compare anything like a Great Depression situation. That's what...
You're too young.
Anyway, it is true that everybody is deeply concerned about this situation. Only thing I can tell as a Secretary General, when the whole international community should promote the balanced harmony and economic and social development, we really need a stabilization of this crisis. This will impact all spectrum of our life, including the United Nations' ongoing efforts to address global challenges, including climate change, developmental issues, and global food crisis, energy issues.
Moving on from that to the situation in Russia and the Caucasus, President Medvedev said he's not afraid of anything, including the prospect of a Cold War. Do you think there is that prospect, that danger of a Cold War?
I think I share all these concerns with other citizens of the world, but at this time, we should not make any hasty conclusion from what's happening and what has been happening in some parts of the world, including the situation in Georgia. All the problems, conflict issues must be resolved through a dialogue in a peaceful way. That is what the United Nations promotes. Since the outset of this crisis, I have been discussing this matter with all the leaders of the concerned parties, and that's what I'm going to do. Let us not talk anything about even the possibility of going back to old days. I do not really hope that we make any hasty conclusions or speculations which will not be helpful in promoting harmony and prosperity and peace around the world. We are now in the globalization era in the 21st century. We must learn from the past history and should try to all the best efforts to avoid what had happened in the past.
In fact, some people would say that, a lot of people might say, that the greatest threat to the world at this moment is perhaps not from war, but more from global warming and the threat of famine.
I would agree to that in a sense that global warming is the most serious threat and challenge for whole international community, whole even planet Earth. We must mobilize all necessary resources and raise political will and try to address this issue. This is an issue which impacts all the countries, regardless of national geographical borders, regardless of where you are from, whether you are coming from rich or poor countries. This is a global challenge requiring a global response through a global partnership. That is why, as Secretary General of the United Nations, I have put this climate change issue as the number one most important priority one, which must be addressed and tackled with the whole common wisdom and collective resources. I'm looking forward to participating in Poznan, Poland, where the delegations will come to discuss about the shared vision. What kind of framework agreement we will have to replace the Kyoto Protocol. By the end of next year, the international community must be able to agree on universally accepted, very effective, inclusive, and ratifiable treaty replacing Kyoto Protocol, which will expire by 2012. In the meantime, I hope that the developed countries will lead this campaign so that the many developing countries who do not have any capacity to address the issue, who have not made any contributions to this global warming phenomenon, should be able to get on board in this process. I'm going to mobilize all my political power to galvanize, again, political will and mobilize the necessary resources.
And tell me something, Secretary General. In terms of the perennial crisis in the Middle East, can you see a role for Syria in the eventual settlement? Do you think they'll have a role in this?
Syria has been engaging recently in a constructive way through their meetings with Lebanon. They have agreed through their summit meetings to establish diplomatic relations between Syria and Lebanon, and they also agreed to engage in delineation of the border through border committee meetings. This is exactly what I have been encouraging them to do so. And they have been also engaging in indirect talks through Turkey with Israeli government. I hope this kind of diplomatic initiatives will continue. Most recently, there were a summit-level meeting among 4 countries, including Qatar, Syria, and France, and concerned other countries. This is a very encouraging development of situation. At the same time, in Middle East in general, I hope even with after the change of leadership in Israel, this regular contact between Israeli and Palestinian leaders will continue so that they will be able to agree and build upon this Annapolis peace process by the end of this year.
And in terms of nuclear weapons, which Israel is said to have, the question is, of course, nuclear proliferation. Do you think we're losing that battle? I mean, how many countries do you think have nuclear weapons now?
I'm not here to discuss any exact number of nuclear possessing nuclear powers, except the publicly known nuclear power states. I'm very much concerned about the lack of a nuclear disarmament process. I have urged to all the international community to engage and to start this nuclear disarmament process so that the international community can live in peace and stability and harmony without the fear of nuclear weapons.
And in terms of looking at the future, 60 years of the UN have passed. Do you think it'll be here, the United Nations will still be here in another 60 years' time? I mean, you and I may not be, but will the UN be here in 60 years' time?
Absolutely. I believe in this great organization. This is the only universal intergovernmental body for which all international community must strengthen and help so that it can work actively and constructively to the promotion of human rights, to the development of a socio-economic situation around the world, and to facilitate the peace process, to bring peace and stability all around the world. Of course, there are some weaknesses and misgivings on the part of United Nations. We must make this United Nations more mobile, more efficient, and more trustful organization. This is what I'm trying to reform the United Nations to be a more efficient and more trustful organization through making this organization more transparent and also ethically standing at the highest level of this organization.
Do you agree, Mr. Secretary General, with the first UN Secretary General, Trygve Lie, who said, I think to Dag Hammarskjöld, that you have taken over the most impossible job on earth? Is it?
Certainly, it is a very difficult job. My mission is to make this impossible job as a possible mission for the peace and stability and the very harmonious world as a Secretary General of the United Nations. But I need support and cooperation from all member states. I'm still believing that the value and ideals of our founders 63 years ago in 1945 are still relevant, even in this very complicated and much more changing, dynamic world. That is my commitment.
And in the future, do you hope quite soon, indeed starting next year, do you hope to see the changes, revolutionary changes perhaps, in the Security Council? Maybe more members with the veto, or maybe getting rid of the veto altogether?
Among so many reform agendas, reform of the Security Council, for example, increase of membership in and also representation on the Security Council. That is one of the most important agendas of the United Nations. If you consider dramatic changes of the international community during the last 6 decades, it is absolutely necessary that there needs to be an enlargement of this security, and there needs to be some democratic representation of this Security Council.
Well, Mr. Secretary General, we must just thank you for being with us today. I know you've got a hectic schedule ahead. In fact, that's true of every day, all your days, I think. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forrest. It has been my great pleasure to have an interview with you today. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. My thanks to all my guests from Tbilisi to the UN in New York. Do join us again in 7 days when I'll be talking to Václav Havel, Juliette Binoche, and many more besides. See you then.